today we are talking about the war in Sudan. Specifically, why we're addressing why no one is actually really talking about this. So, one thing, if you look up what's actually going on in Sudan, there's been a history of several civil wars really since the formation of the country. But what we're seeing since 2023 is a large scale civil war. 150,000 people have been killed by this, and about 12 million people have been displaced. 3 million of those are refugees outside of Sudan now. What's your read on the situation, guys?
Well, that is devastating to see, first of all. And I think to grasp the whole situation, we have to look into the history of Sudan a bit. First of all, I'll start with the name. I don't know if it's relevant or irrelevant, but we have to get in an account.
It's interesting, at least.
Yes, interesting. So the word Sudan originally originates from the Arabic word, which was used as Bilad al-Sudan, right? And the root word is Aswad. Aswad is black, so it is termed as the land of black, right? That is the origin. And then going to civil war, it is not something that started yesterday. It is ongoing process, or it's ongoing thing for I think decades. I think most of the blame I would put on Bashir, the Colonel Bashir, who was the leader or de facto president or whatever for a very long time, about more than 3 4 decades, and that left the country. Because why I am saying this, Sudan gained independence in 1956 from Britishers, right? And after that, there was a military coup in 1969, I guess, right? And then once he came in, Bashir, right? And he introduced a bunch of Islamic laws in the country, right? He wanted to set Sudan on the course of Islamic jurisprudence or Islamic system, Sharia, and all that things, right? So that I think in 60s and 70s, that was a time where every country, particularly in Europe and America, there was a large scale progressive things going on. Countries were developing, and what Sudan did is going back reverse, right? And that had an impact on overall culture of the country, right? The presidents was set that, okay, this is the way, Islam would be the way, and this is the only way, we're going to go by the old ways, and this is going to work eventually. But at the end of the day, it didn't work. And now the reason Sudan is having a civil war is because of the presidents of what the previous leaders have done to Sudan, right? So it didn't pop out of nowhere, right? The civil war was not created out of nowhere. It's a legacy. Sudan has been struggling with this kind of issues for decades. So, but this time it is more kind of devastating. And on top of that, I will address your question when you said why nobody's talking about it. Number one, it's Africa. That is one of the biggest reasons that nobody's talking about it. For some reason, I don't know, we live in a world where their bias plays a big, big role. We cherry pick things of our own choices. Particularly, we hype Israel Palestine so much that we're ready to die and live for it. At the same time, I was reading the report, and it says about half of the population of Sudan have food shortage. They do not have enough food to eat, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. I didn't see any protest in any Muslim country about, or any people sitting together and saying, we got to figure a way out to end this devastation, right? So I think there exists a bias for some reason. I don't know why, but there exists.
I
Yes.
mean, I would even argue that the some of the Muslim countries are making that in neighboring Muslim countries are making things worse
Oh, right, definitely there.
because they're feeding a side,
Yes.
right? Like there's people sending arms and weapons and money and whatnot to, and some aid, right? But sending aid to a side as opposed to sending aid to, oh, this is for like people on both sides.
I think, sorry, James, before I need to answer this because it's a very important aspect, that whenever the country, any country, not particularly Sudan, is in turmoil, the extra factions outside, doesn't matter, Muslim country, non-Muslim country, they take advantage of situation. For example, there will be people, not necessarily Muslim countries, will be supplying arms and ammunitions and whatnot, but the main players right now in the story is UAE on the one side. It's been alleged that UAE is helping one side, and on the other side Iran is also,
Helping both sides.
yeah, so there is that. Sorry, go ahead now.
And Wagner mercenary group from Russia is heavily involved in this as well. And I think there is an element of that. I think there's an element of both the Western European world and the Middle East tends to treat Africa as an afterthought. I do think that is a thing. But also, even something like the Rwandan genocide, I feel like got more attention than this. Like, if you ask the average person on the street, not the average person, but if you ask the average person who's interested in global politics, they'll probably have a better idea of what the Rwandan genocide is than what's going on in Sudan right now. And my theory on this is that no one quite feels their side in this. So, for example, at the core of it, you don't have two vastly different sides. You have two factions within a previous faction that have now split from each other and fighting each other.
And that's interesting that the one group is led by the vice president, the Liberation Army or something like that. That is a paramilitary, right? And there is Sudanese army. So the two groups, for those people who do not know anything about it, so there is two groups fighting: the Sudanese army and the Liberation Army. Kind of that. There's a militia.
The RSF.
RSF.
Rapid Strike Force.
Rapid
Strike Force.
Yes.
Right. Again, it's not even an exciting name. It is an exciting name, but it's not like a cause-driven name, right?
Right.
It's like we hit people quickly and we're the armed forces, right? It'd be like a war between
the Navy and Special Forces, right? Like
the Navy versus the Coast Guard.
Yeah, SEALs, right? Or something like that.
So there's not a ton to differentiate the sides here in any way that makes any particular group of people excited about it, because it's Sunni Muslims versus Sunni Muslims,
right?
But even then, it's not like a grassroots religious movement. It's not like there's vast grassroots Muslim Brotherhood jihadi support on either side of this. It's like one side of military dictatorship versus other side of military dictatorship, right?
Yeah, and it's very
from
hard
the former military.
Yeah,
dictatorship.
And it's really, really hard to pick a side, and say in some situations you have one side doing good and the other side is evil, right? It's very easy to pick sides, but in this case, I mean, will you tend to support Sudanese army or you will support this rapid force? It's really hard to pick. So then you go back. It's like, okay, why it all started at first place, right? Why in Sudanese people's mind, or people that are elite class or wanted to rule the country, why this is an element that you're gonna stick to the government. You want power. Why you want power, right? I want to have an answer for you guys.
First of all, there's resources there. There's gold mines. Anywhere where there's gold mines in the world, there's a good chance that there's lithium. And now with the emergence of the very public pull from many world governments to try and get a hold of like rare earth elements, they call them, that you need for electrical components and stuff like that. The reason why there was a Rhodesian, a revolution in there was because there are, current day Zimbabwe, they're all empty now, but there are gold mines, right? The reason why some of these other governments are getting involved is because they're trying to position themselves to be the recipient of whatever's left there. And honestly, I don't think they really care who dies in the process. So, then there's that, right? Like when we're dealing with a lot of these things, we have to keep in mind that it's a war. It's an ideologue war being fought by ideologues, right? So the ideologues are like, I'm entrenched in their position and my ideology is the right ideology. And then you have other people lining up to support that ideology. So, the idea of finding peace, particularly when, there was harmony at one point, right? Like between whatever came out. I'm not saying that they're not violent or anything like that, but whatever came out of the Bashir revolution is, you know, for a little while anyway, had some kind of like agreement, right, on the way things were going to go
Very
forward.
short-lived.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's honestly really interesting because neither one. The thing that they both agree on is there should be no democracy. Right? Like it should be the military, and it's either my military or your military.
And it's pretty iconic to say that both were saying that the original cause, the removal of Bashir, was that we want to bring democracy to the country.
Right.
It's what they were pitching, but it was never democracy.
We have an old word from the 80s we use. It's called psych.
Yeah.
The other thing with Sudan is it doesn't quite culturally fit into Africa either. Meaning that it's a very distinct culture, both historically and at present. So it was actually sort of, in some ways, very connected to Egyptian culture back in the day. Like Nubia was what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually pyramids in Sudan.
How was it?
But they're pointier than we have Egyptian pyramids like this and Sudanese pyramids like this.
It reminds me of a dictator movie.
Yeah, right.
Our pyramids need to be pointier. So it doesn't quite fit into the Arab world, even though it is an Arabic-speaking country, and there's an Arab majority of Arabic speakers in.
That is, I think, in big question that people relate themselves to Arabs. And I think we're going to talk about it some other day, that why so many Muslim countries
and
trace their back,
sure,
to Arabs, and that it is not genetically proven that they are Arabs. So yeah, that's.
I also want to add that the spread of Islam in like their neighbor is Ethiopia, right? It's not necessarily viewed as a positive thing by Ethiopians. So, and it's coming out of Sudan. So there's like a lot of back and forth of people crossing the border, and when you go to Ethiopia, I mean they think they're like trace their roots back to Christianity and Judaism, right? So there's this force kind of creeping in from outside of the country, and again, Ethiopia has its own problems, right? They're also in a conflict, and what you're seeing is a lot of like either I'm going to distance myself from this, right? Let them fight it out because whoever's coming out of that, whatever comes through those gates, right, is something that you have to be prepared to fight, either culturally or militarily. So I think, I mean, outside of all of that, like the big picture stuff, we had talked a lot about the thing that people are talking about. It's not necessarily the origins of the conflict or why. They're talking about the things that are happening to the people in the middle of the conflict, right? So, for instance, it's like the rapes, right? Like the starvation. Those are the things that are starting to garner attention, right? So, and I mean, I'm going to tell you, okay, because I grew up in this country. We have actually, since the 80s, been paying attention to that region for a very long time. I mean, Farm Aid in 1985, right, was like end starvation in Ethiopia, and by proxy, Sudan. There was like a huge famine there, and we raised a ton of money, right? And then there were other things that happened, along the way in the 90s. That was like it's always kind of been on our radar, but I think there's also like a fatigue, right? There's a fatigue that's happened with, particularly here in America, in dealing with conflicts in other countries. I think that like people are tired of like, military interventions for one, right? They're tired of like, well, 10 years ago, if we saw this, we'd be like, we should send troops there, right? Like somebody should step in and stabilize the situation. And now we're not there yet. We're not there anymore. I don't think that there's a will in America for that right now from either party, right? I know that a lot of people are like, well, we should keep funding Ukraine or, doing some of these other conflicts. But I would say that the idea of us like stepping in the middle of another person's conflict is not a popular idea. And then from that standpoint, we have a consumer-based news. So if the people aren't interested in being involved, right, then it's not news. And then they have so many other things that they can sit there and, there's like the mainstream lamestream media, right? That people will say whatever they call it, but the idea is that they're a narrative that they want to get across, and this does not serve
Right.
their
It's
purpose, right?
in some ways, it's almost like Sudan is a bunch of people's like half brother.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not fully part of the Arab world. It's not
It's
fully
pretty
part of
the
Africa, and so everyone's just kind of ignoring it because there's other things going on.
Right.
No one's really paying attention to it, even though the scale of this is just as big, if not bigger, than like any other war going on.
Yeah, and UN declared as one of the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world right now at the present time.
But ask anyone in Gen X, right? Because they've all been like, we've been around this kind of crisis there, political crisis, famine crisis, all of these other things over and over again. And I think that there's just not like this huge, it's kind of like, again, right? Like really it's happening again.